Thanks, Kurt. Hey guys, how's it going? My name is John Masse. I've been with, I'm going to talk about GraphQL at Priceline. So this talk is for people looking for examples of use cases for GraphQL. I think this talk stands unique from the rest because everything seemed really content-driven. We're e-commerce driven. A/B testing is at the core of what we do, and I'll share with you a little bit about our approach. So if you're looking for some thoughts on how to productionalize GraphQL, I know a lot of folks are probably using Apollo. We are well over 1 million entries, so I'll show you what we're using as well. My name is John Masse. I'm a director of front-end development specifically. I like to consider myself a full-stack engineer at Priceline. If you want to get a hold of me, here's a bunch of ways to do that. I'll have that slide again at the end. So by day, I work at Priceline. Priceline is known as the best deal makers in the industry. It's quite true. Our opaque products are probably some of the most unique, and you can really get some great savings. By night, I work on some fairly complex, large-scale applications. Slew.com, you can control remote telescopes and observatories throughout the world. Classmate.io, I built on Meteor, and it's a real-time education platform. I run an agency called ECMAStack, where we teach about stuff, and my technology blog. So here's an agenda of some things we're going to walk through today. We'll start on a product walkthrough to kind of give you a sense of what our engineers are tackling day to day, how we represent deals and what we focus on. Then I want to reveal to you some of the problems. And I might even touch it, if I remember to, I'll talk about some of the history and how we got kind of into the mess that we ended up in. And I'm going to show you, I have some representation of our API data I'll show you and some problems we're trying to solve. Later, we'll talk about our implementation at Priceline and how we, our current setup, and then talk about performance a little bit, because I know that's super important to everybody. So we'll talk about the products a little bit. I know it's going to be a pitch. I'm going to try to move through this as fast as I can to not bore everyone. But a Priceliner, typically, for the front end, you're going to be dealing with a list of things. This is our shelf, if you would. If you had a shelf of products, this would be our shelf. At Priceline, so we're really going to be focusing on the list here, and this list is consistent of what we call deals. What I showed you previously was our desktop version of what we call our hotel listings, and this is our mobile. We are adaptive right now. This year we're actually launching a brand new responsive experience. Very proud of it. Hope you get to see it very soon. So let's talk about the deal. So Priceline finds success in creating new deals, and that's new list items. So they're decorated, they're marketed differently, they have different merchandising, they have different messaging, things that are very unique. They're state dependent, meaning if you're signed in or not. If you're not signed in, it might be locked. If you are signed in, it's unlocked and potential there. So what happens is our product owners, we're always trying to find new ways to show things and make deals and savings more understandable to our customers, and that's when a new program will roll out. So there's a few slides of just some examples of different types of deals that will appear. Some are fairly more complex. This is what we call a member deal. We have different badges, different types of decoration. You have real-time availability. We have a guest score, which also changes a lot of different sorts of content. We have photos that are sourced from different places. This is what we call an express deal. If you're familiar with the Priceline brand, you may or may not have heard of this. Kaylee was a big promotion on express deals specifically as part of our brand. Again, we have different types of savings claims. We have amenities, which we have. This is an opaque product, so clearly you don't see a photo of the hotel. You get a star rating and what the star is. You don't get to know anything about the hotel, but we try to make it feel like what we call a retail product. This is probably the simplest format of what we consider a deal. You know what it is, you know what the price is. We have our pick. Again, a lot of this stuff's based on machine learning and different complex algorithms that kind of surfaces stuff up to the front end to either personalize or create a deal for you. A mobile deal, if it's just the smartphone, you're only allowed to see those deals there. And then they all kind of have to live and marry together in this nice list of stuff and more. And by more, I mean more deals, right? That's what we want to roll out. What new programs can we do? So our engineers are really into the practice of what I would call deal recognition. Like, how do you kind of grok the information? How do we represent what it is that we showed you on the front end? And I have just kind of a sneak peek for you of just a little bit of JSON. And this is completely public. If you hit Priceline.com and kind of poke around the console, you too can have your own very own copy of this code. So In a minute, I'm going to talk about kind of how to, Priceline's a big company. We're about 20 years old, right? JSPs, Java, ASP, everything. This company's used everything. And then I came in, I'm like, I'm a front-end guy, I want to use JavaScript, and it's super cool. And eventually, now we use JavaScript, and it is super cool. So I had to present. We have a CTO, we have a lot of official things, and we have to do army building, and a lot of other stuff to kind of get technology moving. So part of my pitch was, hey, look, guys, we have a mess here. And where this mess came from, and I happen to remember, which is good, is that we do a lot of A/B testing, right? So content comes in, content comes out. And at the time, our product team was really kind of driving the change. And the product team's like, I want to show this to customers. And the API team says, OK, DTO, vomit. And then, and ta-da, then we have stuff like this. I'm just going to highlight a few of these because I think they're particularly interesting. So if you're a front-ender, right, so say you're an associate engineer, you're looking at this JSON for the first time, and you got to create this new deal. I need to show what's on sale messaging, right? So we have on line 107, we have this nice min rate promo thing, on sale now, save 14%. But wait, whoops, on line 124, this is one hotel. We have the same message, but we have a different percentage, say 15%. So which one are you going to use? I'm a junior engineer, I'm going to use line 107. All right, I'm going to go with that, right? I'm going to save some people some money. We have, let's see, we got terms here, redundant terms, right? So this is just content waste. We're literally shipping strings over and over and over. This is one hotel entry. If I scroll up just a little bit, we're actually inspecting what's called rate summary. We got, these are hotel amenities, right? Some policy information, some stuff about where this hotel is, and voila, we're at the first hotel in this collection. It starts off okay, but then as you get deeper and deeper into this. Now, notice I showed you a list of deals, mobile exclusive, express deal, a lot of other stuff. Where is that in here? Nowhere. It's nowhere. It's nowhere to be found. And that's a problem. And I'll save a little bit more, but I just want to show you this. Other part of the problem is it's massive. It's just sheer madness. Fun fact, you cannot use Priceline.com post-booking when you get to, after you book something and you're on a Windows phone, it will die. You will run out of memory. So this is just, it's not acceptable. And by no means am I trying to throw engineers under the bus. These things happen, right? As engineers, we don't know any better. We're just trying to solve problems. And that's where it ends up unless you start asking questions. So we finished our JSON review, so now let's get into some of the other stuff. So when I started proposing the use of GraphQL at Priceline, oh, and since we all kind of had our first run-in with GraphQL, I had the great opportunity to attend the very first React Rally conference. And they presented GraphQL, I think, it might have been for the first time, not the first time, maybe they were open sourcing GraphQL at the time. And I remember I was sitting next to a senior engineer from Priceline, and I'm watching the presentation, and they did the query, and I watched it for the first time, and I almost jumped out of my seat. I looked at the dev next to me, I said, Ben, do you have any idea what this means? And he says, no. At that point, it was an uphill battle of trying to figure out how to connect this technology with engineers, both front-end and back-end, to get a sense of where the value lies. So, issue number one, API documentation. Based on that piece of JSON, do you think there's anything that tells you what's supposed to be there and where? No. So that's a problem. Inconsistent properties. We have mixed types. I didn't show you that, but you probably saw it. So that's a problem. Various settings, null fields, maybe it'll be there, maybe it won't be there, maybe it'll be a string that says false, maybe it'll be the number 0, who knows. It's likely not going to be there at all. Redundant data, which I showed you, we have property whack-a-mole, which is kind of fun, right? Where somebody, the first presenter mentioned, like, you get the undefined, and right? So kind of property, we don't know, it's not going to be there, and you have a production issue all of a sudden. Hooray! This response size nature of A/B testing. For those of you that do it, you know that you're creating stuff that may or may not have to be destroyed later. So don't commit to it. So, and that goes back to kind of creating flexibility in your stack. and I think that's something GraphQL affords us transparently. Backwards compatibility, for those of us who have been through a migration, I've been through several myself as well, thank you. And it's just a pain, and we shouldn't have to deal with that. Tightly coupled architecture, which is a problem. I remember I overheard a backend engineer say, just push it, and then if something's broken, someone on the front end will tell us. Oh, man. Content tests are hard. They shouldn't be. And I guess it depends on where you are with your content stack. If you have a robust CMS, which we don't. It's interesting, Priceline, we third-party most of our content, and we aggregate it. And that's where most of the work is in kind of understanding the content, making meaning of it, deduplicating it, and making good stuff and getting good stuff to the front end. So we want to simplify this. An inconsistent experience, and I'm glad I didn't say this earlier because it's true. So if you load up iOS, when you load up a new deal and everything's ready to go, why is it that on the mobile phone it shows up as a mobile exclusive deal, but when I load on iOS native, it's not. It looks like a regular retail property. So what's the problem? The problem is that property whack-a-mole, we didn't figure out exactly what deal was supposed to be based on what was available in the JSON at the time. So not good. All right. Adoption of GraphQL. So I've been at it for a little while. I've been blogging a little bit. I've had the great opportunity of having to, what I call, build an army. It's the process of getting new technology into a company, especially a company as large as Priceline. So I start with the team, and I start with their managers. I say, look, guys, don't you have a problem? Huh? Yeah, this hurts, right? And then I propose them, hey, I built this prototype using, this is called GraphQL. What do you think of this? And then instantly get the print. If you have a good idea, right, then you'll get your engineers on board. And then I go to their managers and I say, hey guys, what do you think of this? This is too nuts. And they're like, oh no, this is super cool. Whatever, front end guy. And then then you go to the CTO, right? And the CTO is like, this at Priceline is a big deal. We have a technical steering committee. You sit at a table. You're ready to go. You have like a coach there, like ready to kind of talk you down if you're getting too nervous. And you're ready for him to like get into some kind of deep runtime thing. And you're just like, oh man, dude, I just want to write divs. But I had to do that. And I was lucky because our CTO came from a startup. And I was like, GraphQL. He goes, you had me at go. And I'm like, this is the best ever. So our CTO is on board, and that's actually super cool. So the rest is really about helping the product team understand, and I'm not going to get into it in this talk, but when you oversell it, you could get into some deep water with some folks that don't quite understand. It's really a tool for engineers in building good software. So I tried writing a post to kind of connect with some folks to help them understand where it lives and why we actually use it as engineers. So what we call GraphQL, before we even started talking about GraphQL, we were considering what we call orchestration, or orchestration technology. And I honestly believe that the terminology makes complete sense, right? Because that's what we're doing. Orchestration content between services and a client or some kind of written client. So traditionally, right, we have some client connecting to some public endpoint, and these are our services, pardon the crude boxes. And we have, and when we're making connections, our engineers have to deal with connecting to said service. You get that content down, and then you somehow kind of write some client routines to create an interface out of that. And what we mean by orchestration is that we have this middle tier that lives there that deals with connecting to those services for us and allows the clients to really express things. Now, when we talk about orchestration specifically, we are working in collaboration with our backend engineers to really understand what is the appropriate type of work for us to perform in our orchestration tier. And for our service engineers, they deal with connecting to GDSs and complex systems, maintaining databases and connections to those things and the uptime, memory management, etc., and all the good stuff. And our orchestration tier is really, we consider it a read-only part of our platform. We may do some fun stuff in between there. We also expect to do A/B testing between different sources of information in that space. But that's really the crux of what we're hoping to do. So anything can happen in the service tier, and any of our subscribed clients can just move on from there. All right, cool. Another really cool thing is that we actually worked with a partner and a third-party service to orchestrate with. And this was kind of a cool feature where you can call in and get a very special exclusive discount. and that was another service. Problem though is that they wanted to use a multi-part form, and we had to post to it. So that complexity of dealing with that service and the documentation of that, we've now managed to simplify all of it through a single field and a GraphQL query. Pretty nice. All right, so our implementation. We have GraphQL, we also have Node. Why did I include Node on this slide is because you can have different runtimes for GraphQL, which is also kind of interesting. It doesn't have to be JavaScript, and some people are really, there's some open source projects that are pushing that. We do use Apollo, but we only use the client. We don't use the Apollo server, and really no specific reasons why. Here are some fun projects that I saw. Golang we have on our roadmap POC if we're sensing any real kind of latency or sluggish issues, just due to the nature of JavaScript and how it runs, based on how much traffic we're receiving or how much orchestrating needs to happen. We have productionalized Go, and it is kind of on our roadmap to experiment with it. We have 0 problems so far, so I don't expect. We may or may not. Cool, graphical, sweet, right? Graph stuff. So I just wanted to show problem solved for documentation. This was a piece that we finished as done. This is actually a super cool inner source project that we started to use. Now you saw that giant piece of JSON, right? Now go graph that thing with no docs, with people that have been with the company and left the company and adding things and removing things. They don't even know where it came from. So we had a brave engineer sit for several weeks and kind of try to sort out. And I'll tell you, he got close that first time. But as a company that we A/B test just about anything, really major things, especially this, we A/B tested the performance of our GraphQL service versus calling our public endpoints directly. We were a little soft in parity, and I'll show you those test results. Actually, we're almost exactly flat. I'm like, call it, let's go, we're done. And but no, there was a small dip in conversion for a very specific part of our business. It wasn't retail so we had to figure out what it was. So we have this inner source project called Test Harness, and what we use it to do is compare API responses. This was a tool originally built by the backend team to make sure they didn't break us in production by making any sort of API updates. So we actually ran this against GraphQL and just kind of matched up what that was, and we were actually able to find up some kind of like very deeply nested things. Our goal is to get to a one-to-one parity, right? To make sure the platform is stable and that it's going to carry us forward in the direction we want to go. And also take a look at how it's performing as a service and to understand when we could be dipping or creating a pain in the business due to poor performance. So that was super cool. So the metrics of interest, things that we're interested right now. Who's calling GraphQL? I'll show you a diagram of our chosen architecture, at least for now, and why. What services are being engaged by the platform? Okay, we want to know what is it calling, because we don't know who the hell could be calling it. Anyone could be writing a query anywhere. We have teams of engineers that have complete access to all of this. They could be changing. We have PRs all day. I mean, we're inner open source, I guess is the term. We want to know the performance of everything that's being orchestrated. We want to understand the uptime and system performance, memory utilization of every instance that we have. So here is a nifty diagram. I got a little carried away with the middle tier stuff. We got some drunk node processes. They've been at one too many meetups. So this is kind of how our set. Well, I'll just start at the bottom. We have the world. Okay, this could be your browser or any client, which connects to what we would call our web tier. This is the public stuff that you see visibly. You notice GraphQL is not on that tier. We don't let you just kind of hit GraphQL directly because we are learning. We want to know, we want to understand the performance of the service. We want to understand the queries that are coming in, the demand of the content, and to make sure this thing's going to stay up and do what we need it to do. GraphQL connects to our legacy APIs. Okay, so we have what we call our listings or integrated listings API. It's JSON, it's written in Java. And we have our what we call our integrated details API, which also includes some things about summary when you get into checkout and booking. We do use data loader. Data loader, I completely agree, does not get talked about enough. That is an awesome library. We use it since HTTP. We use it for caching. And so if multiple calls need to happen with the same parameters, it's not going to beat on the service multiple times as we're kind of waiting for that work to happen. What else? So kind of a cool thing is now that we have orchestration, our Java engineers are like, well, we can really do whatever we want now. We're now loosely coupled. What if we built this new content service? Now imagine the time it's going to save on regression testing, on everything you need to do to push new stuff to production, because you don't need to worry about it anymore. We're able to create smaller, more specific systems, and then those systems we can just plug it in, and the front end teams can say, well, we want to represent that through a bottle of beer. What else on this? Oh, and Splunk. Anyone here use Splunk? Have access to Splunk? A couple of you guys? Yeah? Cool. So kind of a cool thing about being in a big company is you get big tools. You know? So Splunk is what we're using. This is a shot of, we call StayQL because it was a hotel-specific thing first. We were the first ones in prod, so we thought we were cool. And so Splunk is really, to give you kind of a deeper understanding how it works, Node is logging stuff. Files are made. There's a job that takes those things. Hadoop and streaming are involved, and then eventually our logs are ended up into the Splunk place, or what we call a data lake, and then we can write complex queries and build any kind of dashboard we want against any piece of information that's available to us. So through this, we're able to really do everything that we want to do. We understand all possible errors from any possible service. And the way we engineered this is that if any new piece of orchestration starts to come online, will automatically be picked up by this. It doesn't matter who implemented it. So story about parity. This was just a snapshot of a few days of this running. We ran it across 2.5 million users. And the results, this was like the first time we ran it, and it was completely flat. So you would expect like a performance issue, and why I want to share this with you is that that's a good amount of traffic. These are paying customers, right, that are coming in, and we didn't see any significant crash in that. So when I'm talking about a conversion, I mean, we're talking about a very small detail that we're chasing after. All right, so what's next? So we have a new responsive details application. Orchestration is a requirement. Any new data or information that's being used by any of our teams are required to use our orchestration tier to do so. So we expect to have a new responsive details app that's coming out this quarter, fully using orchestration. So desktop listings, we do have this conversion thing that we're dealing with now. We launched a prod. I wanted to show you guys some real-time charts. But we turned it off because we had a defect. It wasn't GraphQL. It was somebody else, a guy. I'm gonna talk to him tomorrow. No, I'm just kidding. He's cool. So we want to continue expanding our logging. So we're really looking at and following kind of the work that Apollo's doing. We can do all the same stuff ourselves with Splunk and queries. And really understanding demand of data, I think, is super important. Very, very interesting. Something I didn't talk about or have a slide on is like the nature of A/B testing is the creation of things that can die, right? Things you build them and you expect them to fail all the time. You expect the customer to just hate the thing you put in front of them, and they will. They hate all of your stuff. So it's important that, and another detail I like about GraphQL is that I can put something into production. I can say this is going to die, and then take it away. And only the demand, the queries, right, and the client that's subscribing with the query or subscribing to a specific field, if it puts another process to work, you're only putting the demand on where the work is happening. And I'm probably not saying that completely clearly, but that's a side effect that I think is very, very important, is that when we're talking about large, complex systems, that we care about the uptime and the load on these things. We're only putting on the load on the things that we actually have demand on. And with clever thinking with engineers and good back-end engineering, you can really kind of create a balance. Like, you know what, there's more things here, and you can really focus on where you spend your time and your resources. And that really talks about service architecture changes. That's it. Thanks, guys. Any questions? You kind of have to ask a question.
Yeah. But I do actually have, just so.
Oh, let's go. All right, let's go.
Yeah. So for me, going back to when you were talking about how you're using two things actually, two questions. First, I'll start with Splunk and how you're basically essentially building your own monitoring out of logging in there. What was the choice that made you say roll our own instead of picking like optics from Apollo or something like that?
No, that's great. So we're always encouraged to use the tools that we have. A problem that we had is that as an old company, a lot of people did decide to roll their own for a lot of different types of things. We have our own testing framework, right? We call it SETI. Now it's called ACE. So that we have to go through and refactor all the stuff that's using the old thing. We invested in Splunk to kill all other monitoring tools, right? We had tons of them. And Splunk has been great for understanding. I mean, it's really logs, like being able to put interfaces against your logging. So it's not really that fancy. But it was a tool that was there. We have invested in all the training so our engineers understand how to use it and build dashboards. So we really didn't see the value in kind of diving into something that we then, we would in the first day break the free ceiling before we understood the value, and then we'd be paying for a new system that we then have to get it. Now we're also PCI compliant, so we have to make sure all that stuff is good, and you know what I mean? So there's a lot of complexities, especially in the e-commerce space, that sometimes it's just use the knowledge you have to do the things you understand. And Splunk was just kind of a no-brainer for us. And we just have tons of Splunk support. Yeah.
That's perfect. And so then my second one, when you're talking about on demand, just trying to clarify that a little bit. So what you mean is that because in GraphQL you resolve to certain nodes which could tie to certain expensive queries or requests or something.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, you mean it's easier to monitor which resolvers are expensive or what systems that they are being pinged more by GraphQL. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So when you add a field to your GraphQL document or query, you are subscribing to a piece of information. JSON and REST don't give you that. You get query string parameters with maybe some filtering, and that's really it. And then the rest is just up to you to decide. You take it or leave it. What I think is very interesting is that a query is a piece of structured content. So you know what the demand is. You understand what fields your customers or clients of your service are actually interested in. So what that does is not just for what you support today, but for what you decide to support tomorrow, you could begin to deprecate and prune back and understand, well, look, we actually introduced those fields as an A/B test 2 years ago, and nobody's deciding to use it anymore. We might as well just, oh, and by the way, that's actually putting this service to work or this database to work. And it's actually cheaper if we just get rid of it altogether. Right? Does that answer your question? Cool. Cool, guys. Anything? Yeah.
Between the clients, the GraphQL clients, how did you choose Apollo over Relay or something?
Yeah. So we are blue. So we have a mixed stack right now. So we went from I'm not even going to talk about it to Angular 1. And then we went to React and component-based architecture. So all our new stuff is React. Our homepage is React. Most of our stuff's React now. We're almost completely Angular. For Apollo, specifically to the client, most of us are using it. We really have one home-rolled library that we use to make queries to our service. But we found that the Apollo client it's got so much in there that you didn't really think about, and there's no point in kind of rebuilding all that stuff. You understand, I don't know, I don't remember specifically, but you understand when your response is actually ready. You could do a lot of the term is escaping me right now. Perceived performance types of things, right? Because you know when your data is actually available instead of kind of creating these fake things, which is still.
Optimistic UI?
Yeah. Well, optimistic. I don't know, perceived performance and optimistic to me are two sort of different things. Optimistic is assuming it's going to be good, right? And then you run it and you're like, hooray, and then it, oh wait, no, in fact it wasn't, and then something flushes it through to the truth. Where perception is kind of lying and magic. And magic is lying, but whatever. I'm not sure if that really answered your question, but if you want to talk later, we can.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions? Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for having me. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.